Hopping over to the city felt like a giant, much-needed leap from the same old of my small-town life. It was like the city was calling my name with all its buzzing life, new faces, and endless opportunities. I finally found this quirky apartment after looking around for ages. It was tucked away in an older part of the city, where buildings had a sort of vintage pride about them, and it felt like every nook had a story to tell. My new spot was up on the 3rd floor of this slightly wonky building that looked like it was trying to peer over at the newer, straighter buildings nearby. The landlord, who was always cracking dad jokes, gave me the heads up about the place's personality. Creaky floors that made music when you walked, windows that pretty much did what they wanted, and walls that had this cool, old-timey vibe. But I was sold on the place's charm, and the way it felt like it was just brimming with creative vibes. The day I moved in was perfect, with the setting sun making everything inside glow. The creaky wooden floors and the tall, skinny windows just added to the whole vibe, showing off the city lights as day turned to night. It was so peaceful, like the apartment was taking a big, deep breath, ready to start fresh with me. But man, I had no idea that the peaceful vibe of that first night was about to get flipped on its head. My first night there was this mix of city sounds and quiet moments. I was just about to drift off, all snug in my bed with the city's hum as my background music. It was the chill vibe I'd been craving, a total 180 from the quiet I was used to. But that calm didn't stick around. Just as I was about to crash, the quiet exploded into this wild noise fest. It was like all of a sudden, the place next door turned into a late-night construction zone. My heart was all over the place, not really getting what was going on, but I somehow managed to crash. I was too wiped to deal with it now, so I made a mental note to hit up the Neighbour in the AM. Woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. Yet, when I knocked on my neighbor's door, there was no response, as if the night's events were a figment of my imagination. Thought I'd ask around, see if anyone else was getting their sleep messed up. Found this one dude down the hall who said yeah, he heard stuff, but it wasn't a biggie for him. Obviously no biggie when you are leaving far from the Neighbor. On night 3, things got really creepy. I heard sounds like heavy stuff being dragged right above me, mixing fear into my already stirred-up frustration and turning my sleepless nights into a horror movie. I kept thinking about going up there and dealing with it face to face, but man, those noises were freaky, kind of got under my skin. Decided to shrug it off, crossing my fingers that the whole thing would just sort itself out. But when the drilling kicked in for the 4th night in a row, that was it for me. I marched right over to the Neighbor's place, ready to tell him to knock off whatever racket he was causing. The door opened super slowly to reveal this guy who looked as weird as the sounds he was making. His eyes were dark and kind of spooky, and just looking at him sent shivers down my spine. I tried to keep it together as I asked him to keep it down. But man, his hands looked like he'd been wrestling with a monster or something, all stained and scratched up. The light from his place threw all these scary shadows, making it look like some kind of horror movie set with hammers, knives, and what looked a lot like blood splatters. The vibe between us was tense, filled with this thick silence. He just nodded, which didn't exactly reassure me. I booked it back to my place, feeling like I'd just dipped my toes into some nightmare far from the city dream I had in mind. Once I was back inside, all the adrenaline that had me knocking on his door drained away, leaving me feeling cold and freaked out. My cozy little apartment felt more like a scene from a scary movie, with every shadow looking like it was hiding something spooky. Even though the noise stopped, my mind was racing with all sorts of crazy thoughts. Part of me thought about calling the cops, but then I wondered if I was just freaking out over nothing. Either way, there was no way I was spending the night there. So I grabbed a few things and headed to my sister's place to crash, hoping I was just being paranoid. When I got to my sister's, I spilled everything: the noise, the creepy neighbor, and my middle-of-the-night visit. She listened, wide-eyed, and we both agreed to deal with it in the morning, hoping a fresh look would make things clearer. That little break didn't really help chill me out, though. Heading back to my place felt like I was walking into a horror movie, every step heavier than the last. The building, which used to feel kind of homey, now just seemed creepy, like it was hiding all sorts of secrets. When I got to my door and found it wasn't quite closed, my heart just dropped. Someone had messed with the lock. It felt like a huge invasion, like the cherry on top of a really bad week. Realizing this was serious business, I called the cops. The cops showed up and did their thing, all professional but kind of distant too. They checked out my neighbor's place, and it was weirdly clean, like nobody had ever lived there. No sign of the late-night DIY horror show. And there I was, my story sounding thinner by the minute. After the cops took off, promising to check in but clearly not buying it, I was left alone with the echo of their footsteps and a head full of questions. I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that clung to me, thick as the city smog. I decided to move out that very same day. So, with a heart heavy with disappointment and a mind swirling with what-ifs, I packed up my life once again, leaving behind the dream of city living that had turned into a nightmare. The next few days were a blur, with reality and my nightmares all mixed up. The city, once this big adventure waiting to happen, now felt like it was just watching me, not caring one bit. Those memories from that night, and all the stuff left hanging, were like ghosts I couldn't shake off.